Greetings, Purple Fam. How is everybody doing tonight? I said, how is everybody doing tonight? Making sure that, thank you, making sure that everybody is awake. And I am Tanya Pendleton. I am a cultural critic, a journalist, a broadcaster. On Monday, I was in the presence of our vice president moderating a panel there. And here I am today moderating a panel at NYU with the fabulous D'Angela. Yes, equally impressive individuals. So I also host a show on Word Radio in Philadelphia, which if you are interested in hearing, it is called Reality Check and is on wordradio.com. I had to say that because, they pay me. So in any case, I want to introduce this Purple Rain Roundtable and our wonderful guests that are with us this evening. And to my left is Matt Thorne. He is a novelist, a screenwriter, and a cultural critic. He spent 7 years, interesting, okay, writing a book on Prince, which was originally published in 2012 and recently came out in a brand new updated edition. So make sure you go and get that. He is the director of the Master's Program in Creative Writing at Royal Holloway at the University of London. Welcome, Matt Thorne.
Thank you.
And to his left, the man who goes by a moniker that we all know and love, Dr. Funkenberry. But his mama named him Jeremiah Freed. Writer, podcaster, media personality, and one of the most dedicated keepers of Prince's legacy, known to the music and Prince world, as I just said, Dr. Funkenberry, or J7. He is a music historian, pop culture critic, and a Prince historian with over 3 decades of music experience that allowed him access to work for and with Prince. Yes. Yeah. Welcome, Jeremiah Freed.
Thank you.
And Rodney Fitzgerald, if you...
I paid them all well, thank you. Check them out.
And you know that reception is because if you want to party with the Prince folks, then you party with Rodney. He is the founder of Prince 365 Celebrate, a media event and consulting group which curates events around Prince and his associated artists and fam of 40 years dancing. Okay, brother. Yeah. He's creator of the social media group and clubhouse show Prince 365, hosts annual Purple Weekends for the 365 fams in different cities once a year, and is currently consulting and rebranding former members of the Purple Circle. Welcome, Rodney Fitzgerald.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Especially the ones in the back. Wake up.
So we are here to talk Purple Rain, and we're just going to be really free-flowing with it. But one of the things that I wanted to focus on is kind of the time of Prince, because I feel like if you were not someone who was right there in 1984, you may not recognize, one, that there were some massive seismic, I would say, shifts in the culture around 1984. In fact, in January of that year, Apple released or at least they released the commercial for the Apple Macintosh, the computer that I think we can all say changed the world. And interestingly enough, if you go back and watch that commercial now, they'll say 1984 is not going to be 1984 because they're referencing the George Orwell book. However, seems a little ironic given everything that has happened since. So that is the world of which Purple Rain was wrought. That was the time. That was one of the things. Also, Michael Jackson was burned, as Arthur referenced in that Pepsi commercial, and I think that set the seeds for some of the things that happened. And Marvin Gaye, in April of that year, was killed by his father. So these are just some of the things that were going on. And in looking at putting this panel together with the 40-year span, the 40-year anniversary of Purple Rain, certainly a big span in my life. And I was just having the conversation only to find out that I'm the oldest person on this panel. So I was in college when Purple Rain came out, and it just, I feel, just hit the culture in a way that very few things have done before or since. So I want to ask each panelist, in terms of your own experience and where you were and what you were doing or what you conceived of it at the time, how did it hit for you? We'll start with you, Matt.
Okay. First of all, I want to say thank you to D'Angela for inviting me here. It's an amazing event. It's really nice to be involved with this and taking part with some fantastic people, and I've really enjoyed all of it. I'm going to talk a little bit about this, I suppose, from a UK perspective. I grew up in Bristol, which is in the southwest, and there was a real connection between Bristol and New York. So a lot of the things that were going on in New York at the time came pretty quickly to Bristol. So people were really interested in graffiti. People were really interested in hip hop. So in '84, and also through films, things like Breaking and Wild Style and Beat Street were all really popular. So all of that had come through. And the thing about the way we received, sort of thinking back on it, how we received Purple Rain was it maybe took a little bit longer to break in the UK than it did in America. So When Doves Cry didn't go to number 1. I think it went to number 6 or 7. Somebody here, I'm sure, will know the exact details. And the other 2 singles as well also didn't go to number 1. At the same time, the Shaka Khan cover was all I Feel For You was also in the charts as well. So it was a mixture, you know, it wasn't just it sort of hit us in the same way. It was more like it took a little time to get to us. And also because Purple Rain, the film as well, took a little bit longer to come out. So, and Prince didn't tour England at that time. You know, he came over in '81 for the Dirty Mind tour, and then he didn't come over again till '85. So we didn't get to see the Purple Rain tour. Obviously, it was big, it was phenomenal. You know, it did eventually impact in the same way, but it wasn't all at once. It wasn't with quite the speed that it was in the US. It seemed to take a longer, and also we were sort of seeing the B-sides to the singles at the same time, and all of that was it was very much singles driven as well. So the singles and the 12 inches were around at the same time as the album, rather than it being what I imagine was more of a kind of seismic hit as it was in the US.
Jeremiah, what about for you? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt, for all that. Thank you again as well for D'Angela for inviting me. I really appreciate it. So with 1984, you have so many different things, but also I feel that the thing that set it up was 1999, the album. And the only other artist that released an album in 1982 that released something in 1984 was Bruce Springsteen. The thing is, with When Doves Cry, and I talked with Arthur about this last night, that was an event. A Prince single being released was an event. So even at my age, younger, you just knew something and it was just different. And at that time, in 1982, going back a couple of years, radio was divisive again. You didn't have certain things happening that were happening maybe in the 70s. Everything was just being, you know, from White Axe to beyond to that to differently, but with MTV having to be forced to play more black artists, also the radio landscape changed to where on R&B radio, you're now getting Hall & Oates. And then on black radio, you'd be getting different artists. But Prince was already mixing that beforehand. But When Doves Cry was just this explosion. It was exciting. And then you're having this thing to now, oh man, can't wait for the next thing. We've been hearing about him doing B-sides for years and these other things. What's going to drop with that? Then you have that hit with 17 Days. Then you have the album. Then you have the movie. And you just wonder, like, how advanced was it? It was that he was just ahead of it and knowing what was going to explode. And at the same time, he was part of it. He was making things change. And he made the music business exciting. You know, we talked about this privately with Lionel Richie, as great as he was. There wasn't excitement behind it. Prince came on there, When Doves Cry, you're seeing the motorcycle, the visuals of everything, you're like, oh damn, I can't wait to see that movie. I could talk more about that, but I'm gonna let it go to Rodney, because I know he can add more onto that.
The older gentleman in the group. Okay. Thanks, D'Angela, once again for the invite. This is fun. Let's set the stage. 84, freshman in high school, Reaganomics. Wilson Good in office in Philly. That WB machine was like no other during that time. You have also like Springsteen on the scene. It was like a perfect storm. At the beginning, like the MTV allowing black artists videos. When Doves Cry 7-inch was the single released. Then you had the massive advertisement role of you coming home and saying, we're going to play When Doves Cry at 4:30, 5:30, 6, 7. It was the invitation, and you were just smashed with it. Then the awards and Night Flight on Saturday, and you had everything. But I don't think social media back then would have propelled it the way the surprise of everything back then was played out. Everything was a marketing machine that was laid out. Don't tell anyone. NDAs were at the top of the list back then. So I think it worked all in a better play. And then we're going to lay you out with a film. Shout out to Blue Park in Danville, Virginia. I saw that movie 3 times that night. So it was just laid out for everyone. So that's my memories.
So I think the question is, and we keep referencing Lionel Richie. It's because Lionel Richie had 5 top 10 hits in 1984. So he became kind of the most. Yeah, there you go. Yes, he did. He had. You'll remember All Night Long, Running with the Night, Hello, Stuck on You, Penny Lover,
Dancing on
right?
Ceiling.
Hello, Big Video, and so Tina Turner, What's Love Got to Do with It was out. Madonna's Borderline, that was, I believe, if not her debut single, that was kind of the single that broke her to the world. And then, so Lionel has 5 top 10 hits. Well, Prince has 2 number 1 hits, but he is responsible for 3 other top 10 hits. That would be Purple Rain, Chaka Khan's I Feel For You, and of course Sheila E.'s The Glamorous Life. So in his own way, he's also responsible for 5 top 10 hits, including the 2 number 1s, and then Purple Rain inexplicably only goes number 2. I don't know who kept that out of the number 1 spot. But the point is, there's a big difference, I think a marked difference in the music that Prince was making. So Matt, why don't you talk a little bit about the music and how it was different from what was popular at the time?
Well, I mean, Lionel Richie had the Olympics as well, didn't he? That was the big thing, that he had that big sort of mainstream push. And I suppose the thing about, one of the interesting things about Prince was that, I mean, it's always interesting. I know I'm preaching to the converted here, but there's always, 2 things going on at once. And one is the very mainstream hits like, Let's Go Crazy, Purple Rain. And then there's things like, as we all know, like Computer Blue and The Beautiful Ones and Darling Nikki on that album. And it's that 2 things at once, that sort of, you've got the singles that are presenting one vision of Prince, and then for the people who hear the album, they see the other vision of Prince as well. And that's not true, obviously, of someone like, well, I don't think it's true of someone like Lionel Richie. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. But it's that, it's the sort of thing that he constantly did, even when he was doing his what appears to be his most mainstream album, or at least his most successful album. And I don't mean mainstream in a critical way, because I do really like the album. But it is that kind of simultaneous thing of reaching the masses, but at the same time making sure that anyone who kind of investigates further finds new stuff, and then it keeps going, doesn't it? So you sort of like, you hear something like Darling Nikki on the album, but then you discover a B-side like Erotic City, and it's absolutely incredible. I mean, it's interesting in terms of the sort of bootlegs for that. I mean, the first time I heard any Purple Rain kind of bootlegs was a box set called Royal Jewels, where they kind of mixed up early Purple Rain songs and also songs that for other artists that might have been on Purple Rain, like G-Spot. That was the first, but that was a little bit later. So at the time that it was coming out, I wasn't particularly, I don't know if other people were, I wasn't particularly aware of other unreleased songs at the time of Purple Rain's release.
Let me ask you, what do you think it was sonically? There's a difference in the albums that we're talking about, or the singles that we're talking about, and the singles that came out with Purple Rain. I mean, what made the music so different that it stood out in the way that it did? And Jeremiah, why don't you take that one?
Well, it being its most accessible album, along with successful, it just seems that everything was just planned out right. But he was planning it years before. When you have I Would Die For You and Baby I'm a Star, really, we find out was written and he was starting performing in 1981. Like, he was just setting everything up and he knew it. Just like when you talk about the video format, no, let's go bigger. Let's do a film. No one's done that before. And just the vision of it, you can just see that probably when he was writing Let's Go Crazy with the Dearly Beloved, he's like, that's how I'm gonna open up the movie. He just knew. It's just these things that are just on it, and they call it the genius years or whatnot. But he knew how to make an impact. And then what you had was, because, as we said before, the Purple Rain is the gateway to a lot of people. But you had 1999, Controversy, Dirty Mind. Now you had all these layers to unwrap when they're figuring them out. Then you're hearing all these different stories about Prince, because he isn't doing any interviews, and that would piss off Rolling Stone. Here they are, they have to give him the cover, but he wouldn't do interviews. You know, Kurt Loder at the time, who was the managing editor of Rolling Stone, loved it. When he worked for MTV a few years later, he hated it that Prince would turn him down. But you'd have all these different things and just saying up, and that would be it. Like, the only interview he did for 1999, we didn't have another interview until 1985, was with Robert Hilburn, who was a Bruce Springsteen guy at the LA Times. And like the first thing that Prince says, I think, I'm not Jamie Starr. So here it is, wait, when you're trying to find these layers, who's Jamie Starr? Then he's being told, well, it is Jamie Starr isn't Prince. But you have all these different layers, like I said, but he set everything up, and you may not have had the time. The time is getting played on the pop charts, and yeah, they may not have been top 20 with The Bird and Jungle Love, but that was in heavy rotation everywhere. And it just played with so many different things that he just took over radio that year. I see your Lionel Richie. I got you and Sheila and The Time.
Rodney, what sets Prince apart musically during this era from his peers?
It's piggyback, him being a chameleon. As we grew up with Prince and For You was wondering every album, what are we getting next? Dirty Mind comes, like, oh, he's turning, grunge now. Then 1999, Controversy, and then the pinnacle of that machine, Purple Rain, and you're like, where can he go after this? So it was that his writing, his songmanship, everything was different. There was nothing out there like that. The Beautiful Ones. Who writes that? I haven't heard it since or before then. And it's just, and if you go back to the film, everything was laid out. I still think that Wednesday should have been on the album, but that's a whole other thought for a different day. But it was laid out like the film. Let's Go Crazy was the introduction to Prince and the band. If you go back and listen to the song and where it was laid out, it was basically here's Wendy and Lisa, here's Brown Market. It was basically their intro, and then it goes right into the songs. But side note, at the time, I think it should have been on the album, their soundtrack. But then again, with his competition, he wasn't allowing that because that would have put them. And then with the dailies of Morris killing it in the dailies, that'd have been a whole nother. We would have had a whole nother symposium on this one. So,
and I mean, he's also doing it in a relatively low budget way, isn't he? I mean, there's a lot of marketing money behind it, and obviously it's a big push. But he's doing this thing of creating masses of songs. I mean, a lot of the people who were involved with Purple Rain or around Purple Rain, whether it's Albert Magnoli, the director of Purple Rain, or other people around him, were saying that, often said that Prince wrote hundreds of songs and felt about them all the same way. And I'm sure there's a little bit of exaggeration there, but he was definitely producing masses, and that's not the way that people usually do big budget albums, right? They usually focus on 10 songs, they make them as good as they can possibly be. They don't kind of constantly produce more stuff. I mean, a lot of the talks have been quite interesting in relation to the sort of the basic structure of this, to the fact that the whole thing is based upon, what's essentially almost rehearsal recordings, live recordings. He's using really kind of, in a way, kind of raw, primitive stuff, and then building up stuff upon that, which again is, nobody else does that or comes near. And it runs contrary to the kind of logic that you imagine if you're making a big budget album or something that's going to be successful like that. You think you're going to keep practicing it, you're going to record it in the best studios, you're going to have the best producers. He manages to avoid all of that and do something that's better than anyone else at the time.
Yeah, I think the bravery of doing the live tracks, Jeremiah, what do you think? Master musician, master marketer, or both?
Mastermind. The real true one. That takes so much balls to just be like, we're going to try and do this in one take. We're not going to do anything else. And he did that throughout his career with this stuff. But when you have those versions, basically, that recorded on August 3rd, 1983 at First Avenue, end up on the album, he's like, no, we're not changing it. And you just have it just be so amazing and it's so impactful. And again, what was different with everyone else through that era, whether you're dealing with Michael, whether you're dealing with Bruce, whether you're dealing with Madonna, you're dealing with Lionel, George Michael later on, written, performed, arranged, composed by. He checked all the boxes. He had control over everything. Probably should add an engineer credit on it. No disrespect to Susan, but just mastermind, plain and simple in so many different ways.
Rodney, piggybacking up off of that, master marketer, master musician, which one was?
Not from this planet. If we're gonna
Mm,
everything, it was the guts of calling up Bobby Z's brother David to run the truck that night, and we're gonna do this live. And David's trying to get this mix straight and make sure that the electricity doesn't blow out on the mobile truck out front. I mean, it was just his fourth. He knew what he could get out of people, the maximum of it, at that early age. But the scary part is, I'm thankful for Mo Olsen and him to back down from the label of not giving John Travolta the lead. Right. There you go. Because this world would have changed differently. And it was for them to give this young man a film contract with no early work at all, and you just have notes with "Dream" as the title, and you're gonna run with that. I mean, you got to give it to him. But he had that confidence. The swag was off the chart. He said, "This is what I'm gonna do, whether you help me or not." So, I mean, cool. And then we also need to get this man in the Songwriters Hall of Fame.
yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. I think it just continues to fascinate me that, we have such a oversaturation of media now. We've got YouTube. People can go and look up anything that they want to see. I can Tina Turner performances from the 60s, anything. There's obviously 100 million cable channels. There's social media. So how is it that he's able to, without the benefit of all of these things, make himself this cultural phenomenon during this era?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, when you're looking at people around him, you've got to sort of work out whether their how much to give credence to their stories as well, because a lot of people around him sort of say they did a lot to help with that, and I think some of it's, I mean, but I think there is some truth to that in terms of the publicity machine, getting a number of stories about him into the press every day. I mean, that's, and if you can build up that publicity at an early stage, it sort of stays with you forever, and if you do it in that kind of analog era, I mean, this is in no way sort of like reducing his talent and impact and success, but having that machinery behind him, I think was really important to that.
Another thing that I noticed later on in life when he was sending me news and stuff is he was basically writing his own press releases. So you may have had Howard Bloom and Liz Smith later on, but he only did that because they were able to reach everywhere. But completely, he was writing his own press releases. So he had control over everything, and that's just what it comes down to is like what Rodney was saying, like we're gonna do a movie. If not, I'm not re-signing your contract with you. Your contract's up. Yeah, we just had a successful album, but you gotta get me a picture deal. We ain't doing nothing. And that's just it. So he had so much control over different things, but also it gave him probably the vision to see what can be done that no one else has done. And let's, as he would say, push the envelope a little bit further off the table.
So he's coming out of Minneapolis, and you were saying, Matt, in our roundtable conversation that you weren't even sure in England where Minneapolis was. Rodney, did we know where Minneapolis was? Did you have an idea?
Mid-90s, you've heard this story, where I tried to sneak into Paisley. Statute of limitations is gone. I work for Lucid AT&T. I'm not going to give you the name, but I'll give you the initials. AT&T, and I tried to sell local service. So when I came in, I had the hard hat and everything. I said, I'm going to see this studio. It kills me. So at the desk, it's like, you have an appointment? No, I'm just selling local services. He said, well, let me check. I'm looking around. They can tell already I'm a fan. I'm in the glass looking like, got my, the old roll cameras. So he came back and said, no, we have another service. I said, you sure you want me to check back there? I'm on video somewhere, like looking like a nut. But this was mid-90s, so at that point through Right On and Black Beat, I found out where Minneapolis was. Also, Bob Dylan. Sure. But it was not until like late 90s, early 2000s where I started to go on a frequent. But yeah.
But we
That's
didn't.
where I found it.
Yeah, I mean, because we knew what New York was like, we knew what LA was like, but we didn't really know. I mean, our representations that we had of the Midwest, but people weren't really traveling as much as they did much
Right,
later on in that
absolutely.
period. So you'd just see it, and you'd have a sense when you're watching a film or a TV show, this is set in America, but not
It seems
necessarily
so
which
far
part of
away.
it. So it seemed so, but I think that also increased the sense that Purple Rain with the film was set in its own world, because it didn't look like New York, it didn't look like LA, but we didn't really know where it was. So it seemed like Prince Land rather than a
Right.
place that.
But the fact that he's able to give you this alternate universe, so to speak, that was this place called Minneapolis that felt like this mecca of music. I mean, to give obviously the history, there weren't that many people coming out of Minneapolis that were black musicians by the time Prince got started, along with the associated acts. But Purple Rain album, 9 tracks. That's a very interestingly edited work when you look at it, because it's running less than 45 minutes. So in the thought process of putting this album out, do you think he left anything out, or
Go on,
Electric
Rodney. I know you've got one
Intercourse.
on this.
Who won Electric Intercourse on the album? The barn scene, that'd have been a nice little interlude. I mean, just checking. Wednesday with the little, I mean, it was a whole pining thing with Jill throughout the film. So why not add the song Wednesday? She had a crush on Prince. Then you have the relationship with Wendy and Lisa. You can extend to that, but then there's only a certain amount of minutes on the LP, so that's the only
Making it,
caveat.
as you said, just under 45 minutes. And of course, we find out now there was a little bit longer, Baby, I'm a Star.
Right.
A little bit longer, I Would Die for You. A little bit longer, Take Me With You. So he was doing it purposely. But now, why aren't we getting all this stuff?
But this is a different talk.
But that's a different thing. But saying for the 9 songs, it was just he planned it that way. Anything else, even a second more, probably would have been it. It's like a TikTok video now. Gotta get it within a minute, or else you're gonna lose the audience. So it's like we gotta have it be just right, and every song on that album hits. Could you imagine Beautiful Ones being replaced by Electric Intercourse, and we're not having the Beautiful Ones on there though?
No,
You want
absolutely.
both,
Yeah.
not just one.
I mean, I think for me, it's the album where you don't really want to change anything on it. But it's really interesting to hear everything that didn't go on it, but you don't hear any of that and go, yeah, that should have been on it. It's like Electric Intercourse, amazing song, really want it. But as you say, do you want it on Purple Rain, at the cost of what you would lose? There's no obvious, I mean, and then the other thing is that, okay, maybe you make it longer, but then if you make it longer, it loses its impact. So.
But then on the other hand, do the B-sides then become sort of an addendum to the album anyway?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the other thing is that, Erotic City is, for me, one of his finest songs, but it doesn't feel like it belongs to that period. It's partly because it was played on the Love Sexy tour, and it was had such a big impact there that you kind of think, or for me, I kind of think of it more in connection with where he's going than where he was at the time. But it is, again, it's having the ability. I mean, who else has a song like that and goes, okay, it's a B-side? And then later on goes, oh, hang on, there's something that I should revisit there and maybe bring it back again, and is able to do that and keep doing that. But I mean, the earlier question of, like, on the previous panel about what would you add to it, I mean, I guess I probably would like to add Erotic City to it, but it would change it. It would change the album.
And that's the thing. I mean, can you go back and change something that came out the way that it did? And if you had your way, would you add to it, Jeremiah?
I don't know if I would. Erotic City, as amazing as it was, and it was getting played on the radio, like, even though it was the B-side to Let's Go Crazy, it was getting played. And then you're like, why isn't 17 Days getting that much attention? And of course, he was being sneaky with the love theme from Purple Rain. That was kind of a B-side, but it was in the movie itself, except the other, the different version of God. But anything you take out just messes stuff up. As much as you want to add things to it, it truly is perfect the way it is.
Right, if you talk about his swag, is it swag for you to be able to say, this is it, it's these 9 tracks, and that's it?
Take it or leave it. Take it or leave it. I mean, what can you say? I mean, I argue with some of my friends who are like Rick James fans or whatever, and I just constantly say, he's the greatest. I mean, find me anything. And shout out to Lisa Chamley, who coined the phrase, the greatest of all time. You leave it at that. And, stage, writing, studio. He said if he was an octopus, he wouldn't have a band because he wouldn't eat anyone else. But we will never see nobody like that ever again. And it's just, I'm lucky to be in that little time frame to get to see some of it live, and that's special for me. So.
In the pantheon of soundtracks, Arthur mentioned some of the ones that came out that year, Footloose, Against All Odds, but in the pantheon of great film soundtracks, where does Purple Rain land for you?
Greatest rock and roll film of all time. I mean, what is the anniversary of Footloose now? I think it's the 40th. But still. Yeah. I mean, it has everything. You know, competition, your love story, you know, family
Girl
issues.
being thrown in a garbage can.
Oh, we don't want to go there. You know how many protests will be outside now? If they did, you could not get away with stuff. Yeah.
But I mean, sorry. I was just going to say, well, that's one of the other sort of astounding things about it is that it works perfectly as a soundtrack, and yet we don't think of it as a soundtrack. You know, I mean, I don't think of it primarily, you know, although it is a soundtrack, you know, you think of it as his album, right? You don't think of it as the soundtrack album in the same way you do with some of those other ones that were big in each store.
Right. I mean, just when you think about soundtracks like, let's say, Shaft, that is closely associated with film that stands on its own. When you think about Superfly, another classic soundtrack, is Purple Rain for you guys in that great group of soundtracks that stands alone, even from the film?
It stands right along with the Parade soundtrack. Yes, I had to get it in there. Fight me. With the D'Angelo Love Sexy, fight me with Parade. But anyway, yes, but it stands up there. I mean, it has everything. I mean, I told you, I walked out of that theater in Virginia 3 times and got another ticket. Went to the wall, already had a cassette. Went to the wall, got another one. Put my blue sticker on the cassette thing. And it was just a moment in time. And then Academy Awards. And then, I mean, come on, man.
Now, I'm just curious, how many of y'all, because my cassette got worn out, like
Yes.
within 2 to 3 months, and I had to
Yes.
get another one. Then another 2 months
K-pop.
worn out again.
The fact that we listened to it on cassette is
It
the
was
thing.
a cassette era. That was
Yeah,
cassettes were taking out.
that's
Well,
true.
CDs are just about in the wings, aren't they? But everything was on cassette that year. So 84 and 85, everybody has a cassette. I mean, I thought it was interesting. I mean, the one it was curious recently. I know everybody will hate this, but the you know, the Idol, the Weekend's TV show, when he used "Darling Nikki" on the end credits. I mean, it was and you know, I mean, I don't know what I think about that. I mean, it seems so connected to Purple Rain. It seems wrong for it to be reused in that. But the only thing I think about it's not really a negative, but in terms of thinking about the Purple Rain film, I'm never quite sure whether it does what it could do with Darling Nikki in that film. It feels like it just is a performance rather than actually being. I think it works much better on the concert we'll be watching later. I think he really manages to dramatize it in the concert, but I'm not. I mean, that's the one bit of the. I mean, I love the song. I love that bit of the film, but I just wonder whether there was something more to be done with that song in the film than this does. That'd be my only, not even a criticism, but that'd be my only kind of.
It's so interesting that it was supposed to be like that was the bad song. Oh, he's in rare form tonight. This is terrible.
Rare form tonight.
It's just nuts. And then of
Making
course you're getting
sense.
like first verse, third verse. You don't even get the second, but it's just so interesting. Like that's bad, and a lot of people hung on to that.
And that becomes the song that the PMRC and Tipper Gore and C. Dolores Hudson out of C. Dolores Tucker out of Philadelphia become this flashpoint for lyrics that are considered to be maybe harmful, explicit, a little bit too much. So Darling Nikki does become associated with that campaign. Is it fair? And again, given the times, we're talking 1984. It's not like now where it's kind of anything goes.
I mean, it's interesting to I was talking to Arthur about this actually, about, you know, how seriously Tipper Gore took all of this. You know, how much, I mean, she was a politician's wife. It was a good campaign. I mean, it's sort of interesting that she chose Prince because he didn't want to argue back. You know, like, so Frank Zappa was really keen to argue and wanted to get Prince to argue back, and Prince didn't want to argue back. And you can read that in 2 ways. One is that he didn't want to destroy his mystique. I imagine, by going on TV and discussing this. It would have been ludicrous. But maybe part of me is thinking, did he think possibly there was some truth to that? Not truth, but like some recognition of it, because there's something really interesting going on in the live concert, that this is when he starts to talk to God. Mm-hmm. And the question about whether or not this is showbiz or whether something is genuine, I think is really interesting. And you can follow that through. And if you go to Under the Cherry Moon, where he kills off his alter ego. So this is the first point where he starts to question, is what I'm doing, right? And I wonder whether that's because he suddenly had the most incredible success, success beyond any other measure. There's very few people that he can connect to or know. Michael Jackson's probably the only person who's at that sort of level, and he's been in it since he was a child, so he knows how to do it, right? So you reach that position, you can't talk to your manager, you can't talk to any of the people around you. Who can you talk to? So he talks to God, but he doesn't do that privately. He makes it part of the show, and it's and so night after night, for however many nights the concert's going, he's got this thing of like sitting there talking to God, saying, is what I'm doing wrong? Is it evil? Should I be singing these songs? Should I be performing these things? And when he says things like, but they all love it though, let them accept it. I need to show this. I wonder how much that was a sort of genuine discussion with himself and a genuine kind of consideration of where he was going, and how much it was, entertainment. I mean, and that whole thing always that's one of the amazing things about him, is that he puts that kind of dilemma back into his music rather than answering any easy kind of questions about it.
Jeremy, I have to ask you, since you knew Prince later in his life, did he ever express any feelings of regret for being as sexual as he was, and really inspiring that kind of backlash that turned into everything happening from that point being labeled if it was explicit?
Not at all. At least I don't think so. I mean, here it was. He's succeeding in Reaganomics, and then you have Tipper Gore coming for him. I'm sure he's just like, as we talked about before, and he would say it at times, like, I wonder what Tipper Gore thinks now, especially with WAP or something like that. But to the point, I think that Prince looked back on some stuff and he's like, damn, I look good, or damn, like, I was ahead of the point, Like, he wasn't like old skin, but it was just on there. You can be ashamed of certain lyrics, or you try to change it, you try to do different stuff. But I do feel towards the end, because even the night of April 21st, 2016, that weekend when he had his DJ spinning, Michael to the Max, the dirty versions were being played. Yeah. I'm just going to say that. So there was a little bit of reflection going on, and I think, in my personal opinion, I can't speak for him, but he was proud of those things. And yes, there may have been some things that he was ashamed of, but at the same time, he made things happen and made things better.
Do you know if he had any say in allowing Weekend Fuck to be released?
No, that was when he was the past, right? You're talking about for the Idol.
Yeah, but in 2015 when they were considering it.
Not certain of that. Okay. He probably would have put it to someone else, like, oh, I don't know about that request coming in.
It came back around for them to put it back out. The extra lovable.
Well, the other thing is that I think we're kind of backing into it. Maybe that's not the best choice of words, but we're kind of backing into one of the things that made Prince really stand out during this Purple Rain era, and that is sex. Because when you look at, and God bless Lionel Richie, I'm not saying.
What did he do to you? What did Lionel Richie do?
Lionel, I love you, Lionel. Okay, if you ever see this, really. But let's call it what it is. He brings sex to the table in Purple. I mean, he's already been bringing it to the table, but in Purple Rain, now it's Darling Nikki. We go from Take Me With You to, I met her in a hotel lobby masturbating in a magazine. So how does he use sex in terms of creating this pop culture phenomenon that even now, I'm sitting here in a Purple Rain t-shirt, and you've got people that are wearing the t-shirts and have no idea what it's about, but there's even imaging. There's something about it that captures you.
Less is more. And he used the word of discretion. And he didn't give you everything, until it was time. So shout out to our friend Wally. I think about him every day. He gave me the story of the night they shot the basement scene with Apollonia. It was just the cameraman, the DP, and them two, and Wally in the corner, huddled in the corner, like this. He said, "The mannequin challenge." He said to be quiet. And Prince was he was a little nervous at the time. So when they started the whole dance, everything, and he said Prince looked around, Wally was like this. Because they didn't know how it was gonna play out on screen. But when he saw it, he was very happy of what it came out. And it was just the play of it, and it just brought it to the brink, because it could have went X, but it stayed R. The barn, I think, would have put it to X. But those are things, it just less is more, and just the subtleties. And he was the king of discretion.
I mean, sorry, go. It's really interesting that, We Can Fuck was originally called Moral Majority. So he had this thing of like...
I'm sorry, does that just not sound better in a British accent? But go ahead.
I suppose what I'm saying is that, obviously in the UK, we were coming to the end of punk, and then there was, post-punk, and it was still, 84, it was still pretty rebellious, and there was a real, everybody was anti-Thatcher, all music was, or pretty much all music was left-wing. And then, it's confusing for us to sort of look at Prince and have things where he's singing Ronnie Talk to Russia, and he seems to be quite friendly towards Ronald Reagan, and then he's making, some comments about Ronald Reagan that seem broadly positive, that so from a British perspective, that was really hard to sort of understand. So there is that thing of like him having, incredible success, having that kind of mainstream appeal, but doing stuff that feels, as he said, sort of pushing the envelope, right off the table. And that weird combination feels, I mean, it's still sort of hard to get your head around, really, because you couldn't have an English equivalent, because it wouldn't simultaneously be able to say, okay, the government's okay, or some of the things that the government are doing okay. It had to be rebelling against them.
I'm just laughing at Tanya just focus on your accent. She's not hearing anything else. She's like, man.
I wish you had it sometimes, just to make some comments. But he had a very active imagination. Masturbating in a hotel lobby, huh? I didn't see that in Blade Runner. But just active, and he did exude sex for men and for women. You had Oprah when she talked about, like, you touch places of me that I never knew existed when I saw your concert. I think a lot of people here could say that, regardless of what you are.
Well, I mean, I think the thing is, and this is sort of a three-headed hydra, so to speak. We've got the album, then we've got the movie, then we've got the tour. And already, even before Purple Rain came out, we knew that there was something about this guy that was a little bit different. And if you were, depending on what age group you were in at the time, I've heard people say they saw Prince on an album cover when they were way too young to know anything that he was doing, and were just mesmerized by something that, as you said, that he touched in their spirit. But I think when you're looking at a song like A Darling Nikki and all the controversy that comes to that, and then you're looking at the journey into hip hop and the kind of lyrics that come about later on, it's very interesting that Prince is placed and is associated with that explicit lyrics, and then years start going by, we get more into hip hop, and then, as you said, now we're all the way at WAP. And so you wonder if there's a through line to that.
I mean, the hip hop community, they embrace Prince as one of their own. Not just with Darling Nikki, but with the flow he had on Let's Pretend We're Married and so many other things. You can tell that even though you hear these things, oh, Prince didn't like rap or these other things, whatever. Sinatra at first didn't like rock and roll. He hated Elvis. They started working together and did a duet. You got to go back through that. But that's it. And then what helped out the rap community more was that parental advisory sticker. Oh, we're not told we shouldn't be listening to this. Oh, I'm going to buy 2 copies now. Questlove probably had to he had one out, but then he had to worry about his mom or dad taking another one of them. But, they embraced him, and I think it helped them, and he was part of them. And you just look at stuff more so than Michael, than Lionel and whatnot, and going about with other things I want to get into, like the tour, but when it comes to that, he totally, hip-hop embraced Prince at very, very early on. DOC, you had samples of the skinny motherfucker with the high voice from the Black Album when it wasn't even released yet. They were all on that stuff early.
Tupac was sampling from Purple Rain as well, wasn't he?
Yes.
His workmanship, they loved it. Yeah, so.
That respect. Well, to get into the tour, the movie, the tour, and the album all together, 40 years on now, what did Purple Rain in all of those entities? What does it leave the culture with, in your view?
I'm looking at Rodney because that's a hard one.
It moved the needle. What did it give the culture? Everything. Possibility of what you have in yourself, longevity, learning an instrument, writing, foreseeing what you want to do. No one does the work anymore. Everyone's lazy.
I mean, it's still the model, isn't it, to do all of that? Because I mean, there's so many rock stars who want to become actors and want to have a successful film and want to do all of that. He's still the only one that really did it.
I mean, he's on the 1999 bus.
Yeah.
Writing a script. I was like, what are you doing?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean,
doing a movie. I mean, but no one, who was doing that?
What is it? I mean, 'cause you sent us over some stuff to look at beforehand, and I'd forgotten about the Pauline Kael review where she compares him to Diana Ross. And I mean, on one hand, it seems completely crazy that that's the only point of reference that she's got. But on the other, you can sort of see, where she's going. This idea, who else is in that lineage of being able to, of being such a good musician and wanting to be an actor as well and being able to do it. And there are very few people that to this day who can do that.
Right, and he completely and totally was a needle mover. I mean, when you have it in, again, these other people that released the album in 1982, Bruce Springsteen didn't tour with it, Prince did. And then in 84, 85, here it is, I'm going to tour again. He was constantly working. And as you said, everyone's lazy. All these other people that felt, I could have been Prince or whatnot, he never stopped working. If he took a break, I'm going to go see a movie. He had 3 more ideas for a song.
Yeah. I think the reason why he didn't get in a lot of tabloid trouble because he was in the studio.
He was always
Paparazzi can't get you while you're at the board. But there's a lot of Purple Rain kids in here, I'm pretty sure. Some of you guys, I'm saying some of you guys have done maybe 2 or 3 shows like myself in 84, 85. I mean, he had cities where he was doing 7 days. I mean, no one does that.
Heard of it at the time.
And then, as we were talking about too, also doing after shows, which is just
another whole legendary.
And those sound checks.
Yeah.
They were doing stuff from like an album or 2 before, and now we're finding out about it now.
Right.
Those sound checks. Everyone else would be
amazing,
like,
the sound checks.
Some people would do sound checks maybe 30, 40 minutes. No, he's doing like a 3-4 hour sound check.
I would rather have a sound check album. All sound check.
And he's really getting into James Brown at the time as well, isn't he? Again, he's getting back into more so, yeah.
But see, you're leaning more towards parades then.
And I mean, to think of these 3 projects again, we're talking 1984, and there are people here who know that or see artists now as multimedia superstars. You see a Beyonce, you see a Taylor Swift, they're doing concert films, they're doing tours, they're doing albums. But in 1984, was that the norm?
Nope, not at all. Not at all. Anywhere. I don't know if you had anyone from the UK, whether it was Animan or other people. There was nothing like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely nothing at all. And I mean, the way, and Springsteen wasn't such a big deal there as well, so it's like Prince was, I mean, the only comparison, I suppose, at that time is Madonna, in terms of, in terms of being an actress and in terms of having the hit album at that time. But she's using, Nile Rodgers and doing spending the money to make the big album, not, but she was recognized Prince more than anyone else. As a fellow artist, she was always,
Right, and that's why I dislike so many people comparing Prince and Michael or Prince and Springsteen, Prince and Madonna, because he was his own person, and these other people were around for a lot longer. Yes, Springsteen was only on his 6th album at that time, and here was Prince with his 6th. But at that time, it was 78 to 84. Bruce was like 71, 72. Just, again, pushing out the material, doing stuff onto the next. And no one was doing that. So I hate these comparisons. I bring up this stuff just to show a certain point, but there was no one close to him. And now, yes, the whole thing is, you got to be a movie star and a music star and be on SNL next week. Right. It ain't like that anymore. It wasn't like that then.
So we move into the movie, and then that is its own thing. And there are times when I look at the clips from the movie premiere, and I realize, or I wonder, and maybe you can address this, because I think you had a relationship with Prince enough to know, or get some level of insight into what he was thinking when he was at the, if however much that is. But when he was at the premiere, I always think to myself that he looks as though he's realized like there's no turning back.
This is it. He's now going to be famous, more than just regular #1 stuff. You have it though, but he didn't like the attention. He just wanted to be a musician. He wanted to play. Oh, I got to walk from the freaking limo. All right, I got to have something in my hand. Give me a dang purple flower. Something. Because he got to have that attention. But there was the hair looking perfect. There was the outfit. He knew exactly what to do, even when he was not comfortable. And he looked totally uncomfortable, but he owned it. And he made it as, like, I'm not going to be talking with these MTV people. Let Eddie Murphy, let Paul Rubens as Pee Wee Herman do these little things. That ain't me. Little Richard, like, the Prince is me.
There we go.
What was the Academy when we saw the 8mm of the Oscar before Purple Rain came on?
Yeah.
That thing took my breath away. I think I haven't seen that in so long. When he got out of the limo, it was in 8mm. It was like a star just lying around him. He knew at that moment when he got out with Big Chick, this is it. It was just, and I'm just laughing at Little Richard. I wanted to give him my Bible.
So at this point, once he reaches this level of superstardom, as we just said, there's no going back. So how does the Purple Rain era shape the rest of Prince's career? Matt?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I guess I don't see Around the World in a Day as such a big difference as people sometimes make it out to be. You know, it's still a rock album. You know, it's still a rock pop album. You know, it's still. I mean, I think there's an alternative. I mean, we all have fun imagining alternative versions, but I think there's a version where he carries on being as rock as he is there and does Roadhouse Garden. Or this, I mean, I know when we talk about possible alternative albums, it get into a hornet's nest. But I do think there's a possibility that he keeps going in that direction, and he does a Roadhouse Garden album with, Our Destiny and some of the other songs that were put out on the extended version of the deluxe version of Purple Rain. I think that's possible. I think there's it's a kind of, if it wasn't as successful, does he keep wanting to push it? I mean, the thing is, once you've triumphed like that, you can take a step back. I wonder if it had, as it could well have done. I mean, there was a possibility that the film wouldn't have got the attention, as good as it is, it might not have got the promotion it needed. It might not have, gone over the top in that way. So I wonder whether he would have kept the Revolution in a similar form for another album. That would be one possibility.
I just feel so many different things. It's like he was afraid of being the Little Red Corvette guy because how that blew up. Now here is Purple Rain's on a whole different level. He's like, oh, great. I got to perform the same songs every freaking night on this tour. I'm getting bored. So he was afraid of being the Purple Rain guy. So here it is. He's dropping Around the World in a Day less than a year after Purple Rain's success. Unheard of at that time. But I think that's who he was afraid of. He wasn't afraid of anything. He just didn't want to be pigeonholed into different things. So I go, I'm going to do this album, going to be completely left field just because I do not want to be labeled Purple Rain guy. I'm not ashamed of it, not scared of it, but I do not want to have that label on me.
But unfortunately, does he become, for the generations to come, the Purple Rain guy?
I mean, it's really interesting because I don't think he was for ages. I think it was, I think for a long period, I think Sign of the Times was kind of certainly among fans and maybe among critics held as a slightly higher position than Purple Rain. But I think in recent years, and particularly since his death, Purple Rain has kind of blossomed out again and become the thing that he's connected. Weirdly, I feel like it was a possibility of it being seen as something, a continuum where he gets to Sign of the Times and then that's the peak. But now I think people are, maybe because of the iconography and some of the things that people have discussed today, that he's so readily associated. And also the fact he re-embraced it, right? I mean, towards the end, he was doing shows where he was playing 5 or 6 Purple Rain songs after, that whole thing about doing it hits for the last time. you know, but then Purple Rain became, even with Third Eye Girl and right to the end, he was really leaning when he said I'm going to play 8 hits in a row or whatever. It was usually most of Purple Rain would be most of those songs.
Purple Rain to me was the gift and the curse. It was this magnum opus, but if most of us knew how Prince was, he would always shift. So Around the World in a Day came, and he's on his normal pace, but the record label and them was expecting Purple Rain, the sequel. And so when he came in with Wendy and Lisa and the flowers and everything and laid on the ground, they're like, what is this? But that was a great album. And then he changed again, and then when he got into issues with the NAACP, thinking that he's not black enough anymore, and he said, okay, I'm going to show you, but I can tell you. So then Parade came, and we got that, and he went back to normal. But for us.
Well, I mean, but it's also he's been embraced by Europe then, isn't
yes.
it? I mean,
we got all the great after shows in Europe.
But with those things, it just, it's frustrating because, like as we said, he was not wanting to be the Purple Rain guy and kept changing his image. Right now, there is a little bit of problem where it's very Purple Rain heavy. I'm not cool with it. I mean, 77 through 2016 is what I'm about. I love, 40th anniversary Purple Rain needs to be celebrated. We got a bunch of other stuff too. We just, all of us together, everyone in this room, we got to make sure that the other stuff gets the attention that it deserves, because we're going to have Michael Dean doing a 30th anniversary of Come, going to be part of that later this year. I'm super excited for that. There's just so much material and so much that, we want the younger generation, other people know, oh, Purple Rain is awesome. Let me play you this. Let me put the needle on the record for you.
So I want to say something. So that's the reason why I started doing the symposiums, is because certain albums, almost all the albums, weren't being celebrated. So it started with the 30th anniversary of Sign of the Times, because no one was celebrating 30 years of Sign of the Times. No one celebrated 30th anniversary of Love Sexy. So I'm nobody, but in my world, Prince is everything. And as long as I'm alive, I'm gonna make sure that all of his music is appreciated. So I'm only one person. Like you said, Jeremiah, it's gonna take all of us, and we gotta pass it on to the next generation. That's the reason why I do these things here at NYU, even though my students left. But hopefully we'll get some more students, or maybe some students are watching online. Prince was a really amazing human being, and the power of possibility and potential, human potential. I could go on and on, but I won't, because we have some questions from the audience that I want you to ask. So can I bring them to you?
Okay. Got it.
Do all of them, just the ones you want.
Okay, wonderful. All right, we've got some questions, and then something happened. Whoops, sorry.
I'll take this.
It went to, yeah, you can take that. It did something here. Technical difficulties, 1 second, please.
Let's have Matt say stuff in his British accent to make us all sound smarter.
Have that Royal box too.
Yeah.
Man, they have no idea.
All right, so to everybody on the panel, do you think the Purple Rain album would have become what it has in pop culture if it were structured like Graffiti Bridge and included songs from the time, Apollonia 6, and Modern Air? This is a question from Theo.
Why am I the first guinea pig?
Well, you got a strong opinion on this.
Rodney.
Like I stated earlier, with the time being on the album, I think it would have been a different beast. But I think it was planned by Prince to have it by Prince and the Revolution, because I think in his heart of heart he knew, with the time and the way they were doing things, this would have been a different ship. But but I still think that ship would still roll even if you put them on there, but slightly different. But I mean, you couldn't stop it. You just couldn't stop it.
I mean, the reason why, or one of the reasons why people had problems with Graffiti Bridge was because we then knew that we just wanted prints and not the other stuff, right? Or you wanted it on different projects. Whereas at this time, you would be introduced to it all, so it would be more exciting, I think, to hear the time at this stage in their career alongside the Purple Rain songs would work.
Right. And you did have that release in Japan, Strange Tales from the Rain, which had all that on there. Right. It just doesn't flow the same. It's just yes, you got to buy 3 different albums to get the soundtrack, and then the associated artist is Sheila as well. But it just didn't flow as well. Right. And Modern Era as well. Sorry, not trying to get rid of Dez. It just did not flow as well. That's all. It's cool. I think now we want that as well, but we already got the Purple Rain, so we don't want that messed with.
Well, I'm going to piggyback off that by saying, what if these songs on the extended version had been released along with Purple Rain? Would that have changed things for the better or for the worse?
See, nowadays you got special editions all the time 6 months after an album comes out. So now you'd have that. Back then, that wasn't an option. This is what you're getting. But that would be so cool to have. When you think about, get Roddy City 7-inch and the 12-inch. Wait, there's an even longer version that he didn't put out? Just these different things in 17 days and all that stuff. Yes, if they're doing a special edition of that later on, like how they do now, for sure. But don't mess with success.
It doesn't have the mythology as well. Part of the reason we signed the Times was that we knew there were all these other projects that went towards it.
A question that I ask myself often, and this is for everybody from Blue, do you think the album and movie would have turned out differently if Vanity had stayed on and stayed together with Prince? And if so, how? Would Prince have been different if Vanity had stayed with him?
Trying to say from a chemistry standpoint, maybe. I just can't imagine Denise jumping into that water. Chemistry standpoint, probably more for sure. Then that barn scene, good Lord.
I think their chemistry would have been different. Yeah. The chemistry would have been,
Better or worse?
Better.
Yeah.
Wonderful ass.
People wouldn't be talking about how he kisses as much.
If they could remake Purple Rain with AI and put Vanity in there.
No.
Next question.
You're messing with the metaverse now. This here's a business.
We'll have Troy put Le Petit Prince into it and do that instead. That's a better idea.
Rodney, this question is for you. What would you replace for Wednesday on the final configuration and why?
Why would it's not on it?
No, if it was on it, if you could put it on it, what would you take off?
You can't. You can't.
So we can't
add it. Put it as a cassette with the album. You can't. I would say if there was room, I would put Wednesday because it's the continuity of the film I was going. Mm-hmm. When she was there and she said, "Oh, when Elisa left your cassette," Jill could have went right into Wednesday at that moment. But no, you can't take anything else off.
So the consensus is we're not changing anything. Okay.
Great conversation.
And it's I think it's that kind of thing where would you change something in history that you wish were different, and then if you do that, there's a whole domino effect. Right. So if you change elements of Purple Rain, what happens in that domino effect? And that's something.
Yeah, because it literally can't get any more successful, right? So it's not there's no kind of unwritten story that could have been achieved by changing anything.
Right. 25 million albums sold, among the most top-selling albums of all time. So you're not going to probably change anything by changing the album sales. They're not going to necessarily get better or worse. So Drazen wants to know, can you think of any other album of such cultural magnitude that came about almost by accident in the sense that the finished recording developed on from the First Avenue charity gig? Interesting. No, an album that kind of came together, not so much intentionally, but was put together by sort of fate, in a sense.
I mean, I suppose you have to think about it as a live album then, right? I mean, that would be the only thing, would be another
Right.
live album. I don't know which one, but that would be the only case where where it wasn't necessarily planned and some magic was captured that evening, and then, then that'd be, but I couldn't really see any other album that does that.
I mean, even Stevie Wonder couldn't do that. You have these other things because you're thinking like George Michael with Faith, and you have all the other things, but with a live album and how that's done. No, that literally came from it. Like even like having to look back on Springsteen stuff for Nebraska, people were wishing that he would have done more of the live tracks because actually a grip of the stuff that ended up on the Nebraska album, which to me is boring. No disrespect to Bruce, but a lot of the tracks that are on Born in the USA came from the Nebraska sessions, but 2-3 years down the road. So no one could touch Prince in that way live.
I mean, it's interesting to compare what the David Bowie estate is doing, where they are releasing, like really big albums, like I think Ziggy Stardust is the next one, and then just replacing 1 or 2 songs randomly with earlier versions, and it doesn't really work. I mean, it's a really odd thing that they've been doing, and I couldn't imagine that being working for Prince, or so for example, they could put out Purple Rain with Wednesday in a limited edition, but it would be pointless, I think.
And has David Bowie, like, I'm just curious, has he come anything to that to where he recorded something live and it became because Prince did that years down the road later with The War. Yeah. Was there anything like that? Because now that I'm thinking about it, because Bowie is just one of those things that just was futuristic as well.
I think there's possibly some, on this new Ziggy Stardust thing, but it's things like live covers of Chuck Berry and stuff that were considered for the album and then changed when something else came on.
I mean, the thing is, I think it's interesting that the intentionality of Purple Rain, the fact that he really was at 26 years old, his 6th album, just able to pivot on each project and to do this album and really just say, this is going to be it. I'm going to do this live stuff, and then we're going to turn this into the album. It's going to be a movie, and then I'm going to go on tour, and I'm going to then do after shows. Like, there's so much intentionality. None of it seems accidental with him. Jeremiah, do you think that that's the case, or are we giving him credit sometimes for things that just fell into place?
I think sometimes he was more nervous than we realized, but his confidence, his swagger, just that I'm going to do this. I'm not going to doubt myself. And that's what a lot of us have to not do in life, is when we have these ideas, go forward with it. Don't doubt yourself. See what can happen. Albeit I don't think all of us can pull off the peekaboo pants too well. But yeah, he's just, everything he did, he knew and he had the vision for it and he went forward. It's just quite simply amazing at 26 years old. I was still probably wiping my nose and stuff at that time,
I mean, I wonder if he knew it was going to be quite so big, or if he cared that it would become, you think he did?
Yeah. I think he just had this idea, well, we have Michael with Thriller and how that blew up in home video. Why don't we do a movie? No one's doing a movie. That's why he's like, you got to get me a picture deal. He knew. And Travolta be damned on that.
Let me ask you guys a tough question. If you had to isolate one of the things, the album, the movie, or the tour, as your favorite, which would it be?
Tour. I mean, and only recently, but looking at it again, I thought I really like it.
The tour. 3 nights in Philly.
See, I didn't see the tour, so I can't say that. So I'll just say the album because it just meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
Being in my room, just,
But did we forget the Oscar too?
No. We didn't forget the Oscar, but we're just, which one of them? You chose the tour over the Oscar?
No, I'm just saying, we didn't discuss the award. We didn't
oh, no.
The original score.
Which was political and never been posed again. But
I mean,
it was political.
Go on, explain. I don't.
Yeah, explain that.
What was it?
It was original song score.
Yeah, but I think, what is it, Wendy's dad or was part of the Academy?
He was part of the Grammy Academy,
right,
yeah.
And you know how that thing was introduced that year and left that year.
Let's be real, though. Because did you see who was against Prince?
Yes.
It was the Muppets, the Muppet Babies, Take Manhattan, and the songwriter. I heard of the Muppets. I never heard of the songwriter to this day.
I don't remember. Yeah.
He had Lionel Richie a few years
was,
getting it for, what was that song? The 86? Say You Say Me, yeah. He got an Oscar for just that song, while Prince did the entire score and soundtrack. A little bit unfair.
Right. What artist today, don't see a name on the question, is closest to Prince in terms of work ethic or projects?
We have to touch that one.
Let's give it a little something. Let's give it a little something.
Beyonce,
Well,
and even on the other spectrum, Taylor Swift.
well, I was going to say, I mean, like, I could imagine.
I know people don't want to hear
I wasn't
that.
shocked.
But Beyonce for sure.
Yeah, no, but I could imagine Prince wanting to do an Eras tour after he saw that. You know, I could just see him, but the same way that Madonna did Celebration afterwards, I could see him looking at that and going, I could do that.
You know that, sorry, that Musicology tour was supposed to be 3.5 hours. AEG was telling him to turn it down. He was trying to do an Eras tour or whatnot, but he was listening to him like, you're going to get paid the same. And you know how Prince is, the pay is the same? All right. Put it down a little bit.
Well, you know what? Can we take questions from the audience? No?
To actually wrap it up.
Okay.
Fashion time.
Okay.
That's going to be participating.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Huh?
Celie.
Celie.
Sis.
Yeah, see,
Yeah.
So yeah.
See,